Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. This is the Chorus Call conference operator. Welcome and thank you for joining Acea conference call on the results as at the 30th of September 2017. As a reminder, all participants are in listen-only mode. After the presentation, there will be the opportunity to ask questions. Should anyone need assistance during the conference call, they may signal an operator by pressing star and 0 on their telephone keypad. At this time, I would like to turn the conference over to Ms. Angrisani, Acea IR Officer. You have the floor. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining our conference call for the presentation of the results of Acea as at the 30th of September 2017. Here with me, we have Mr. Donnarumma, CEO of the company, and Mr. Gola, CFO of the company. After the presentation, there will be the possibility to ask questions. Stefano, you have the floor. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me now give you the highlights of the company, and then my colleague, Mr. Gola, the CFO of the company, will give you the details. Of course, I will step in, if necessary, during the presentation to either take your questions or make comments. As to the results of the third quarter of 2017, as you can see, the results are in line with expectations. EBITDA has grown, which on an adjusted basis is plus 10%, 626 million euros. EBIT, 320 million euros, which means up 6%, and the net profit, 173 million euros, plus 16%. As far as the guidance for 2017 that were disclosed to the market, such guidance is confirmed. What we have to say that when it comes to EBITDA, it runs between plus 4 and plus 6% versus the adjusted figure for 2016, 785 million euros. Investments are going to be in line with 2016, 530 million euros. Net debt approximately 2.4 billion euros, excluding external factors like split payment, exposure to Gala and Attack after the agreement. All of this is absolutely in line with what we told when we disclosed the results of the first half of 2016. We talked about 2.4 billion euros on a non-adjusted basis. So the data is consistent. Let me run you through a number of issues that we had to manage within our company in the summer. For instance, the water emergency in Rome in Q3 2017. At the moment, we have in Rome 2.4 cubic meters per second less versus the average cubic meters that the company receives from the water supply of the town. The service, however, is provided with regularity and without major service problems. We had to step in to make a number of repair interventions during the summer between July, August and September. Such interventions led to the reduction of the leakage rate, which at the moment has allowed us to go back to what we need to provide our services. The figures are very, very important. The Rome water network is around 5,400 kilometers. We inspected the network as a whole in September. We now have made some 2,300 kilometers which have been inspected, and we made 2,300 more or less repair interventions. Well, this means that we have been able to kind of secure the water supply in Rome, although the water problem is not yet over, because we still have a drought in Rome. As far as the strategy plan or the business plan, we had already announced that we were going to submit to the market a new business plan. We confirmed this once again. We have now a precise date which has defined today during the board meeting, which is we're going to have the new board which will approve the plan, the business plan, on the 28th of November, and then, if approved, it will be disclosed to the financial community. At this point, I would like to hand you over to Mr. Gola, who will run through the financial highlights. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I do apologize. I muted my microphone. Page 3, we have the financial highlights of the first 9 months of 2017. We're going through the economic and financial figures, both as reported and on an adjustment basis. You have already seen the data of the first mid-half of the year. In 2016, we have a correction of around 75 million euros of revenues and EBITDA, and of course there is a limited financial impact here, as you can see. In 2016, the adjustments were positive and improved our results. As to 2017, we have adjustments which are related to external factors. For instance, the amounts due from Gala, and in this case we had to make a provision of around 13 million euros. Moreover, the restoring of ownership of a property that houses a car park for company vehicles, around 9.5 million euros, and in Q3 we have also a provision of 6 million euros, taking into account ATAC receivables, which is now under judicial management. Now, this being said, consolidated revenues amount in Q3 2,037.9 million euros, minus 0.5%. On an adjustment basis, plus 3.4%. EBITDA 625.8%, minus 3.1% versus last year on a reported basis, but growing by almost 10% on an adjusted basis. EBIT 291.3 million euros, a reduction by 23% as reported, but growing by almost 6% as on an adjustment basis. Group net profit 153 almost million euros, minus 24% versus the previous year as reported, and growing by 60% on an adjustment basis. If we take a look at the net financial position, and then we shall also explain the dynamics behind such net debt, and we shall be talking also about the net working capital. Now, net debt, as reported, 2,487.3 million euros, whereas as on an adjustment basis, which include the exposure or amounts due from Gala, 30 million euros, and also the beginning of the split payment effect, that is the change on VAT regulation for the payments of suppliers, which has an impact in this quarter of 23 million euros, and which is going to have a greater impact in Q4. Moreover, the effect of the amounts due from ATAC, 6 million euros. Now, if we go to page 4 of the presentation, we shall see the EBITDA. EBITDA in the first 9 months of the year, 626 million euros, 76% related to regulated business, 24% from unregulated business. Let's see the breakdown of the EBITDA for our businesses. Now, water, 15 millions, as you can see, then 9% from energy infrastructures, and then 7% from environment, 2% from overseas, and 6.9 million euros from engineering and services. If we take a look at the different segments and how they contributed to growth, well, versus the previous year, we have to take into account the change in scope of consolidation, which led to an improvement of the EBITDA of around 12 million euros. Well, we can say that the companies that generated an impact in the scope of consolidation are the consolidation of Acqua Industriali, 0.2 million, GEA, GL, 0.8, TWS, 2.2, and then what is most important, the consolidation in Honduras of Aguas de San Pedro, 9.2 million euros. Well, when it comes to the scope of consolidation, there is an increase, but which led also to an increase of the net debt of around 11 million euros. Now, if we take at the results of the different businesses and how they contribute to the growth of EBITDA, let's take a look at page 5. The main factors contributing 15 million euros, energy infrastructure 42 million euros. This is the adjusted figures. In 2016, we had to net the effects of the regulatory lag. The overseas business, because of the inclusion of the scope of consolidation of Agua di San Pedro, 10 million euros. As to engineering and services, there is a change of the scope of consolidation between the parent company and the companies of the group, which led to a worsening of the results of the holding. Now, environment, 5 million euros positive, commercial and trading, negative figures, 12 million euros, 13 million euros, and 10 of these are due to one-offs of 2016. If we go to the next pages, we shall see the performance of the company by the different businesses. Let's start from the water business, page 5 of the presentation. Now, the EBITDA of this business in the first 9 months of the year was 264 million euros, growing by 6.1% versus the previous years, with capex 183 million euros, growing by 23% versus the same period last year. If we look at the drivers, industrial drivers behind these figures, the volume of water sold amounted to 316 million euros, and which is a stable figure versus the same period last year, which confirms that despite the water emergency in this summer, the company managed to provide a total service to Rome. Sludge disposed of decreased from 129,000 tons to 107,000 tons. Well, this is due to the fact that we have put in place a drying process which reduces the amounts of sludge to be disposed of. Now, if we take a look at the performance of this area and how the different companies contributed to this result, Acea 18.8 million euros, of which part is due to the growth of the water business, 8 million, and the change in scope of consolidation in the water business are basically Gel and Umbria 2, which is part of the TWS group, whereas the companies consolidated using equity method minus 3.1 million euros. This is a negative effect due to Gori, and this is a negative effect of, as I said, 3 million euros due to a write-off which Gori posted in the 2016 accounts, which then were posted in 2017 Acea accounts. Page 6, we have the energy infrastructure EBITDA, 239 million euros versus 273 million euros as reported in the first 9 months of 2016, 197.2 million euros adjusted in 2016, plus 21.2%. And the main factors behind this are distribution, 207.8 million euros, generation, 28.5 million euros, public lighting, 2.7 million euros, which is growing considerably versus the previous year because of the LED plan launched in the city of Rome. Let's now take a look at a number of industrial indicators. Electricity distributed, stable, slightly increasing. There is 7,604 gigawatt hours, and number of end users slightly growing, 1,629,000, and total electricity produced is growing because of the increase in the hydroelectric power plant due to the repowering of one of our plants. Now, page 7 of the presentation, we have the EBITDA of the commercial and trading business. As you can see, it is a negative figure, 58 million euros versus 71 in the previous year. As a matter of fact, most of the difference is explained by the fact that in second quarter 2016 we had 10 million euros of revenues which were related to the closure or to the achievement of a contract achieved in March 2016 for the implementation of smart meters. And then 4 million euros are due basically to a worsening of the energy margin, which is due to a reduction of volumes of energy sold. As you can see, we have the change in the numbers of gigawatt sold, as you can see in the box to the right. This is basically due to the free market. As you take a look at the number of customers, this hasn't changed, but the customer mix has actually changed. The company has defined a reduction of B2B companies or customers that were associated to a lower margins, and so we have now a lower number of customers to which we sold electricity with a lower margin. As you can see in the free market, we have 317 customers versus 292, but if we take a look at the B2C customers, we have an increase, whereas the B2B is decreasing, as you can see on the slide. Now, page 8 of the presentation, you can see the results of the environment business. Now, these you can see on page 8, the EBITDA is growing from 42 million euros to almost 47 million euros. And what is also growing is the amounts of waste treated and disposal, 819,000 tons versus 607,000 tons. Electricity produced also is growing, 264 gigawatt hour against 208 gigawatt hour of the previous year. Now here we have a change in the scope of consolidation of the plants which are operating. We have an increased production of the San Vittore plant, whereas we have the Aprilia composting plant which started operating, and then we have the entry in the scope of consolidation of Acqua Industriali and Difeco. Page 9 of the presentation, you have here the industrial areas which are of smaller entity, overseas business, which contributed 11 million euros of EBITDA versus 8 million euros of the previous year because of the consolidation of Aguas di San Pedro, 9.2 million euros. Engineering and services saw its EBITDA grow to 14.6 million euros versus 7.7 million euros, both because of an increase in the maintenance activity, but also because of the transfer to Acea of the facility management service. The holding company has lost the facility management service and records a negative performance amounting to 7 million euros. Page 10 of the presentation. Here you can see the results below the EBITDA, EBIT and the net profit. The reported EBIT of the company is 291.3 million euros versus 378 million euros. Now the adjusted EBIT data, however, correct both figures. The adjusted EBIT for 2017 amounts to 319.5 million euros. So net of the impact of the property housing a car park and reduction in amounts due from Gala and Attac. In 2016, we need to take into account the impact of the regulatory lag. So as you can see, on an adjusted basis, EBIT grows by 5.9%. The same results or the same dynamics is attributable also to net profit. As you can see, the figures on the right. The adjusted net profit, 173.4 million euros versus the figure of the previous year, 149 million euros, which is growing by 16.1%. The tax rate is going down at the moment. Our tax rate amounts to 33%. Now, next page. Here you can see the cash flow of our company. The overall cash flow of the company in the first 3 months of the year, as you can see, 360 million euros negative versus 130 million euros of the same period last year. Let's try and understand the dynamics, which are basically attributed to the change in net working capital. We're working on this in order to make sure that in the future we can resolve the problem of the net working capital and make sure that the company is capable to decrease the absorption of the net working capital, which is at the moment 345 million euros. 200 of this is due to some change in receivables and the remaining for payables and other components. As to receivables, out of these 200 million euros, 80 million of these are due to external factors, of which 30 million euros are related to Gala, 50 million euros are due to the regulatory impact. There is revenues which we account considering the regulatory leg plus the water revenues are accounted for, but will become actual revenues in next year. As to the payables, well, this is due to the operating management of payables. This is what we told you when we presented the mid-year results. This is the effect of reasons due to the evolution of Acea systems, which led to a slowdown of the issuing of invoices, especially in the water business, which decreased or slowed down our receivables. We are working to solve the problem, the issue. We have now witnessed an improvement in the performance, and in Q4 our performance will be visible in the 4Q results. And I expect this figure to be a lower figure in 4Q when it comes to absorption related to receivables. As to debt and other items, we have, first of all, the effect of the split payment. We confirm that this external factor, that is split payment, is going to have an impact of 60 million euros for the full year. But we also have some other items and components that we are now taking a look at. For instance, the reduction of energy sales, which led to cash absorption in the management of commercial payables. Since the amounts of the volumes of energy has decreased, our payables have decreased. So we pay less when it comes to the invoices that we have to pay, and therefore we have a positive net working capital effect, which is reducing. Moreover, we are slowing down payments to our suppliers at the same time, and at the end of this quarter versus the same period for 2016, we have a lot of delays of payments to our suppliers. Now, if you take a look at the whole cash flow analysis, well, we have starting from the EBITDA, we have investments which are slightly growing versus the previous year. Well, this item, as Stefano said when talking about our guidance, we expect the end result figure to be in line with the previous year, and that the net finance income in 51 million euros versus 61 million euros because of the ALM management, and then income tax expenses, which are greater than what we paid in 2016 on net profit, but they can go down by the end of the year because we expect our net profit to be slightly lower in this year versus 2016. Dividends have increased in the first half of this year. The overall cash flow is absorbing 360 million euros. What we can anticipate for Q4 is that in the last quarter of the year, because of a seasonality effect and because of our actions aiming at improving our capability to cash in receivables. Well, in Q4, we expect a neutral result when it comes to the cash flow. So an end-of-year result very similar to what you see here. Well, this will imply, as Stefano said, will imply that our net financial position that we can see on the next slide, as reported this year, is going to be stable at the end of this year. This is what we are reporting now for the third Q, but with a result on an adjustment basis because of the split payment effect and the impact of this in Q4, we should have a difference of around 100 million euros. And so by the end of the year, the net debt on an adjustment basis will be below 2.4 billion euros, in line with the guidance I mentioned before. As to the debt structure, no difference versus Q2, and as you can see, our debt is basically maturity has a maturity of 2018 mostly, and the rest in remaining years. As you can see, we have a 68% fixed rate and 32 floating rate. As to the rating by rating agencies, Fitch Ratings BBB+, Moody's Baa2. At this point, the presentation is over. We can now take your question. Well, thank you very much, Stefano. Thank you, Giuseppe. We can now take your questions. This is the Chorus Call conference operator. We will now begin the Q&A session. Anyone who wishes to ask a question may press star and one on their touch-tone telephone. To remove yourself from the question queue, please press star and two. Please pick up the receiver when asking questions. Anyone who has a question may press star and one at this time. The first question by the Javier Suarez from the Italian conference call. You have the floor, sir. Now, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I have three questions to ask. The first on the working capital. If I take a look at the slide number 11 of your presentation, I would like to understand what kind of managerial actions the company is undertaking at the moment in order to reduce the working capital. Can you please give us a detail of such managerial actions? And then I want to understand why the net working capital should decrease in Q4 as well. And then I'd like to understand whether what you are doing to improve the working capital includes or is related to investments. And then can you explain me what this other item at the very end of the cash flow analysis, minus 15 million, so what is this? And then another question about the water business. Well, I noticed that you gave a capex indication which is going to be stable in 2017. However, I have seen an increase in the results of the water business, and also the leakage rate is going down. So I wonder what is going to be the increase in the water business capex in 2017, and I'd like to know what is going to be the change this year. And then another question about the environment business. The EBITDA is growing by 11%. Can you give us the detail about the Aprilia plant, and also can you give us some granularity about the change in the scope of consolidation? Thank you very much. Well, very well, Javier, we can now give you the answers to your questions. Let me take your first question. Now, the fundamental action that we have undertaken to improve the working capital aims at improving the fine-tuning of our invoicing system to speed up the cashing in of money of receivables. When we disclosed the results of the first 6 months, we told you that we had some difficulties in cashing in receivables, but also difficulties in issuing invoices and also in adoption the typical system to collect the money that we have to receive. And this is due to the migration of our IT to a new IT system, and most of the work was done in 2016. Now, in the beginning of this year, the system was not ideally working. Now, as Mr. Gola, our CFO, said before, in the last few months, we have adopted a number of actions and initiatives to try and improve and to fine-tune the system, but also a number of organizational actions that led to a kind of a turnaround. And in September, we actually recorded we witnessed a reduction in the slope of the curve and a recovery of some million euros. So the main action is related to this. There is fine-tuning the IT systems and making sure that we can issue regularly our invoices and the launch of actions, trying to speed up the payments of the energy bills of our customers, including also the detachment of customers from the electricity grid. We have put in place a number of actions on the working capital, which will be implemented from now to the end of the year, which are going to be illustrated by Giuseppe, and which relate to a number of financial management items. Now, before giving the floor to Giuseppe on this item, let me take your question number 2, which relates to the CapEx trends in 2017 about the water business. Well, what you said is actually relevant and hits the mark. Now, the truth is the following. Now, the extraordinary maintenance operations that have taken place over the past few months, that is looking and repairing leakages, are not operations of cleaning up our networks and plants, and they have a very limited and reduced cost, let's say around 10 million euros. Now, I don't have the exact figures here, but you may understand when it comes to the overall CapEx, around 200 million euros, well, we're speaking of around 5% of the overall CapEx, which decreases slightly the value of cleaning up of the implants during the year, which will be recovered at the beginning of next year. We had to set priorities when it comes to our interventions and our operations, which doesn't have an impact on neither positive nor negative on tariffs, and also doesn't have any impact on the midterm plan, because these activities are going to be shifted for a few months. Please remember that we have a process in place on the part of the authorities about the recognition of these costs. Because of the water emergency in Rome, a commissioner has been appointed by the government on observing and monitoring such emergency, and then at the end the costs will have to be calculated. Let me hand you over to Giuseppe for the other question. As to the actions that we are putting in place to improve the management of the net working capital, Stefano, the CEO, has mentioned a number of actions that we are putting in place to improve the cashing in of receivables. But we are also working on the management of payables. On the one hand, we need to make sure that the absorption of net working capital goes down to zero from this effect, and then we have to normalize our relationship with the suppliers. This is due to a program that we put in place, that we started, and that cannot be resolved or concluded in a few weeks. It's a reverse factoring program with the main suppliers moving from big suppliers to smaller suppliers. At the end of the period, we shall neutralize the impact on the net working capital by suppliers, and we shall no longer have an image of a company that pays its suppliers later. As far as the remaining factors, there are a number of small items that have an impact on cash, but which net the non-cash items. Now, I don't have the details here with me in this moment, but it's not meaningful, and we do not expect meaningful changes about this item. I think you asked another question about the San Vittore plant. I think you wanted to understand the contribution of such an implant, given the higher volumes of energy. Yeah, let me step in. I just wanted to understand the growth of 13%. I wanted to have a breakdown. There is a greater quantity of energy produced in San Vittore, Aprilia, and the change in the scope of consolidation. Now, as far as San Vittore is concerned, I can tell you on the fly, it's going to be around 50 million euros in the year due to the operation of the third line, which is now up and running. Now, as to Aprilia, 1.8 million euros, the impact on the first 9 months, the scope of the change in the scope of consolidation amount to around 1 million euros. Thank you. The next question by Enrico Bartoli with Main First. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I have a few questions as well. I'd like to go back to the evolution of debt from here to the end of the year and the net working capital as well. In Q4, as I understood well, you expect a decrease of the net working capital thanks to the actions that you are putting in place in this moment, whereas we should still have a negative effect of the split payment. Please, could you confirm this? And then what do you think is going to be the change in the net working capital in subsequent quarters? I guess you expect the net working capital to further go down, but perhaps you could give us some more details that would be helpful. Another question about commercial activities in the electricity business. As you said during the presentation, you had a reduction of volume sold on the free market, moreover also a reduction of margins. Can you give me some details about this, and can you please especially tell me what is the reduction of margins due to, and do you expect this trend to continue also going forward? And then another question about the agreement that you have recently reached about fiber optics. Could you please give me some details about this, and could you please tell me what do you expect the economic impact for Acea, meaning the access to open fiber to your infrastructures, or whether you have another underlying agreement about the additional revenues expected to flow in thanks to this contract. Thank you, Enrico. Now, as far as the net working capital for Q4, your assessment is correct. We expect the net working capital to improve in Q4, with a cash absorption which is going to be overall neutral. But if you look at the figure on an adjusted basis in Q4, the neutral cash figure will imply a generation of cash which will net the negative impact of the VAT split payment process, which at the moment stands at 23 million euros, and which is going to be another 40 million in Q4. Now, this means that the NFP is going to be stable as reported, and we expect it to improve on an adjustment basis. As to the subsequent quarters, we are doing a lot of work to improve the net working capital. We expect the net working capital going forward does not absorb so much as it did so far, because of a number of external factors and also because of difficulties in managing receivables and payables. While these items are improving, but we shall tell you more about it when we present the new business plan. As to the energy results and factors, I told you that we witnessed a reduction of volume sold and also of margins. We're not giving you details about margins. What we can tell you is that the company is focusing its attention once again on the sales of energy, and we're working so as to be able to grow the number of customers but also the volume of energy sold, and we are focusing on an increase in margins. This will appear quite clearly when we present the business plan in November. Now, the agreement with Open Fiber, your other question. As you can see, we are now implementing the agreement. We are in a phase of MOU, and in shortly we believe that we can reach a final agreement before the presentation of the business plan. If this is the case, we shall be talking about this when we present the business plan. Let me tell you something, however, about the quality of such an agreement. To answer your question, the effects that we expect and on which we are working, so the effects of such an agreement is not merely related to the use of our own infrastructure for the development of a broadband infrastructure. We're also paying attention and focusing on some other two possibilities. First of all, the possibility to use the broadband infrastructure for our own captive market. We feel the need to control and manage our plans. As I told you before, we are assessing the water leakage, and we have done it twice in this part of the year. That has never happened before. That did not happen in the past in Rome. Now, unfortunately, we have such weather conditions that make this trend quite irreversible. In this moment, we have leakages of 37% versus 45%, which we used to record in the summer. So we managed to decrease leakages or leakage rate, and it is going down to almost the national average, if not below. Now, this is due to the fact that we have advanced technology. We look for leakages with technologies and machineries to identify occult or non-visible leakages, and however, this can be further improved by installing advanced technologies, i.e. sensors, along the pipelines and along the network, which are going to be controlled remotely. This will be done through fiber optics. Now, by making the electricity grid smarter, and this is what we are going to do and which we have already started to do, well, in this case, in this business area, we expect an increase of network automation, remote control of automation, and this requires the use of a broadband. So To this, you need to add the fact that with the second generation of smart meters and thanks to the upgrade of the low voltage network and thanks to the development of the fiber optic system, that is the fiber to home system, well, through this we will explore the possibility to offer additional services over and above the sales of our commodities. So we expect additional benefits from this. However, this will be disclosed when the agreement is finally signed and when we have prepared the business plan. Thank you. The next question by Stefano Gamberini with Equita. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and thank you. I'd like to ask a few questions. Now, can we go back to slide number 6 of your presentation? That is the energy infrastructure business. Now, the improvement of the adjusted distributed from 117 to 208, what is this due to? If I remember well, the effect of the regulatory accounting of 2016 continued to have an effect in 2017. So an improvement of 30 million. So what is this due to? And then I have a question about the working capital as well. Unfortunately, I have not understood the negative impact of 150 million euros from suppliers. You said that you have 27 million euros, which are of a negative sign, which are justified, but then the remaining 120 million euros, I don't understand what these are due to. Could you please explain me this, please? And then as to the net working capital, I heard you mention the reverse factoring process that will have an impact in 2017. I guess you reached an agreement with all suppliers. Can you tell me, can you tell me what is the factoring effect since you are going to implement this policy on the whole year? And then something else I'd like to ask you is about the impact of the new infrastructure fund as a source of revenues in the water business in the first 9 months of last year and in the first 9 months of this year. And also I'd like to know the impact of the quality bonus premium. And then can you please tell me the RAB in the electricity distribution in 2016 and what is the water RAB at the end of this quarter? Thank you. Now, let me start taking your questions. Perhaps I will forget some. You may repeat them later on. Let's start from slide number 6, the energy infrastructure. Now, distribution moves from 249 million euros last year to 108 million euros this year, but from 272 to 208, considering the regulatory lag. Last year we had a positive impact of around 67 million euros related to the regulatory lag, which in the figures as adjusted, or on an adjustment basis, we are trying to eliminate. As to 2017, we have 30 million coming from the accounting or the new method of accounting, which for me is going to be a recurring accounting method, which we haven't therefore normalized. So such a growth of around 40 million. 10 million of these are related to organic growth, 30 million are related to the accounting effect on 2017. Now, let's now take your questions about the working capital. During the presentation, I wanted to give you a detail of receivables and payables. Now, considering that 350 million euros were only due to receivables management would not be fair. There are different factors that need to be taken into account. I mean, when it comes to receivables, we need to make sure that our customers pay us. payables are much easier to manage. What we are doing are the following. First of all, there is a cash absorption in Q3 amounting to 150 million euros, more or less, of which 23 million euros are due to the split payment effect. The remaining is related to the management of suppliers. The cash absorption has to be compared to the figure of the 31st of December 2016. Back then, we had a number of suppliers which payment we postponed in 2017. When it comes to the end of this year, this effect has gone down drastically. What we are doing from now to the end of the year is that to have this effect kind of going up or widening up, not because we are not paying our suppliers, we're not postponing payments, but we have a contract with suppliers, and in this case we have a financial intermediary, and we put in place a reverse factoring contract which allows suppliers to be paid regularly, and this allows Acea to post payments in the subsequent year so that the two data can be comparable. So at the end of the year, the cash absorption related to suppliers is going to be lower than you can see at the end of Q3. I kind of don't remember the other question. The impact of the new investment fund on tariffs. Just a second. We're trying to collect our ideas. Now, as to the nuovo fondi investimento, new investment fund, the impact on the first 9 months of the year, 28 million euros. The water quality premium, 22 million euros. As to RAB, stable, 1.9 billion euros for energy infrastructures, 1.2 billion for the water infrastructures. Thank you. Let me remind you that if you have a question to ask, you may press star followed by 1 on your telephone. Once again, if you wish to ask a question, please press star and 1 on your telephone. Well, the next question is a follow-up question by Stefano Gamberini with Equita. Well, let me step in again and ask this question. In the press release, you speak about major interventions on infrastructures that would have an immediate positive effect on EBITDA and on the cash in of receivables. Can you please give me some more details about this passage of the press release? Well, this is what we have said so far. When it comes to major investments are related to investments that we are making, that we are going to make also from now to the end of the year, and which are going to be made going forward. This will be presented when we present the business plan. Well, this year investments or capex are going to be stable, but this year we are going to focus a bit more on water and electricity infrastructures, and we are going to spend less on IT systems. In 2016, we have more or less the same value, but the mix is going to be different. Well, in 2017, as I said, the company is going to focus a bit more on water and energy infrastructures. As to what we are doing to improve our billing and or invoicing and cashing in the receivables, well, we are trying to solve the problems we had in previous months, improving our capability to invoice our customers and make sure that our customers pay us regularly or on a regular basis. Anything to add, Stefano? No, it's okay. I just wanted to understand the impact on the EBITDA. As a reminder, if you wish to register for a question, please press star and 1 on your telephone. The next question by Merit Zanin with Intesa San Paolo. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to ask a question about the EBITDA, the quantitative data. If we net the guidance, maximum growth by 6%, you need to take into account that there is a difference around 216 million euros on adjusted basis versus the previous year. Are we going to have a positive surprise in Q4? And then can you give me some precise indication about the dividend policy, because you didn't give any guidance about the dividend policy for the year. Thank you. Now, as to the EBITDA, well, we gave you our guidance, and we are working on this, and we hope there will be a positive surprise. In this moment, we can only confirm our guidance. Of course, we, on a regular basis, on a daily basis, we raise the bar, and we are doing the same when it comes to the EBITDA. As to your question about the dividend policy, as I said in previous occasions, well, in this moment, we do not see any factors that may lead us to believe that things are going to be different this year, nor do we have any indications to the contrary on the part of our main shareholders, majority shareholders. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. If there are no other questions, we can conclude our conference call as usual. The Investor Relations Office is always available to give you details or take your questions. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining our conference call.